Good morning and welcome to the July 19th meeting of the Architectural Review Board of the City of Palo Alto. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, good morning. Chair Firth?
Here.
Vice Chair Balte?
Present.
Board Member Guyer? Board Member Liu?
Here.
And Board Member Thompson is absent.
Thank you. This is the time for oral communications. Anybody wishing to talk to the board about a matter not on the agenda but within our purview is welcome to do so. I have no speaker cards. Does anybody wish to speak? Hearing, it's on? Yes. Hearing nobody. Any agendas, changes, additions, or deletions? Oh, we have a speaker card for number 2. Hearing nothing on that. City official reports. Scheduled transmittal. Staff?
Yes. So we have the calendar here. I did hear from Board Member Firth that you would be absent on August 16th, and Board Member Balte would be absent on September 6th. I haven't heard from anyone else, so we should still have a quorum on those dates. We also had the future agendas. It looks like for August 2nd, we are just going to have the public safety building, and the other 2 items would move off to August 16th.
Thank you. Any comment? Great. It'd be good to have those projects back, or that project back. All right. We have 3 action items today. The first one is a public hearing. It's quasi-judicial, so we will disclose any conversations we may have had since the last hearing relevant to it. It's a request for approval of an architectural review application for a 5-level, 50-foot tall parking structure with 1 below-grade parking level, providing 325 parking spaces and approximately 2,000 square feet of retail space, fronting on Waverly Street. A draft environmental impact report was published and circulated for comment. May we have the staff report? Oh, are there any disclosures? Any conversation? None. And we have all visited the site. Staff.
Thank you. Amy French, Chief Planning Official. We have today the third hearing for the Downtown Garage and Retail project. On the screen, I just have a couple of circles around some areas to look at, chiefly on these images, because there's been quite a few changes there. There's some additional changes that the architect will go over. A few more images here. The architect today is actually here, which is great, and presented last time. We have a response to the ARB and are requesting to get a recommendation from the ARB to City Council. We have already scheduled a hearing before Council in September, I believe, and so we're looking forward to that. There have been, in the process, we've had the CEQA, which was last year's scoping. We went through pre-screening. We had preliminary reviews for this project in 2017, and then we have our formal reviews by the ARB. There's a few images starting with February 15th here, moving to June 21st, where we had 3 members, and then today's hearing, July 19th. Back in early June, the council adopted the public facility zone changes that allow us to move this forward to the council for their action to approve the setback modifications. And so that's September 17th. They would be taking action on the final EIR, which is being prepared. The final EIR has not been published, but it will soon be, does contain responses to the ARB comments on the draft EIR and several of the sections on building, landscaping, cultural sections. So there's been some responses regarding the historic post office, noting that we do have these 12-foot sidewalks that are sympathetic to the post office, providing that public realm. We have notes about the metalwork and nod to metalwork on Spanish survival buildings. We have notes about the heights, and we have the emphasis on the cyclist circulation and provisions, as well as the deletion of the tree. So these were comments from the last meeting that three of you were at that hearing, and there were comments on the EIR that were folded into the final. So the key issues, this was pretty much presented at the last hearing, but we're just going to quickly go through this. Looking at the pedestrian path with the higher ceiling through the garage, so there's better pathways from Hamilton through to CVS, rear of that store. We have increased bike and stroller parking, and now a protective walkway down the lower right image for that bicycle storage area. Again, the 3-foot setback, it's a 4-foot encroachment that was increased in the last rendition and maintained here. We have a better alignment with the AT&T building. It does reduce the parking count in the garage. We have corner enhancements. The architect will show you today some of the seating ideas there on the corner. Yeah. Okay. There. We have a few modifications in the architecture with this new kind of cap at the top. We also have a concept for a modified concrete treatment that the artist has put forward. So that's being considered at this time. And that is in addition to the tapestry that was proposed in the last rendition. You had seen this enclosure of the stair at the corner, as well as over the vehicle entrance on Hamilton. So that's been approved by the Public Art Commission. It's not, the content of the art is not in the ARB's purview, but certainly placement on the building is in the purview. So let's see. There was some discussion last time about where the plantings were, and there was a letter that talks about the viability of the landscaping. And I believe we have our landscape architect today to provide answers if you have questions. As far as the adjacent property owner and the operations, we've been corresponding with the adjacent property owners, and there's some items there that were brought up and discussed in letters. We do have a formal parking space in the garage for 550 Waverly, which is per the downtown parking assessment that cites one space. And we are going to have a Waverly Street loading zone, and that's likely to be put in prior to completion of this project to get the ball rolling on that pattern of delivery. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. We have the architect is here to present, and Holly Boyd is the project manager and may have a few additional comments.
Good morning. My name is Holly Boyd. I'm senior engineer in public works, and I'm the project manager for this garage. We have our consultant design team here, including our landscape architect, designer, and our architect. I don't have any additional comments, but I'm going to introduce Ken Hayes, who is the architect for the project, and he has our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Good morning. You have 10 minutes once we get everything organized.
Keyed up, right? Good morning, Chairwoman Firth, members of the board. My name is Ken Hayes with Hayes Group Architects. I'm joined today by the design team, Watry Design with Michelle Wendler and Gordon Knowles. The landscape architect with Merrill Morris, John Potus, is also here in case you have questions for him. And then Terry Murphy from my office is also here, who has worked on the majority of the documents in front of us. I know that Member Liu was not present at the last hearing, so I have a little bit of a review, and then we'll kind of get into the changes. The program, the downtown garage is Lot D. We're familiar with that. 5 levels above grade, 1 level below. We have reduced it to 325 spaces from the 338 formerly, but we were able to add 50 bike spaces as a result of that. The retail space has decreased a little bit per some modifications that we've made down to 1955 from the 2188. And then we are showing the future. Did I do that? I did. I did. It's back up. Solar photovoltaic system. I get another 5 seconds. Project site is a 29,000.
It's an important project. Don't rush.
Okay, thank you. The project site is a 29,000 square foot surface parking lot currently on the corner of Waverly and Hamilton. The project is zoned, the site is zoned PF. The AT&T building next door is also zoned PF, and so is the historic post office across the street. The other sites that are adjacent on Waverly are zoned CDC ground floor P. And so the project is responding to the ground floor component as well as the pedestrian overlay component. We have lane 21 at the rear, which is a one-way alley headed to Bryant Street. That serves as a exit for the project. You could also enter there. And I want to point out that the sidewalks on both frontages are being expanded. The sidewalk on Waverly is going from about 10 feet to 16 feet, and the sidewalk on Hamilton is going from about 10 to 12, depending on how you count the benches that we have located on that side of the building. And of course, the historic Category 1 post office is across Hamilton. So at the February hearing, we heard some comments about some of the concerns on the site planning. And so the building edge at Hamilton Avenue and how the building responded to the 7-foot special setback. We all know now that special setback has been eradicated for PF buildings. And so we don't, that's not a requirement any longer. However, we are responding to it. Board members were questioning why we needed to have this pedestrian alleyway. And so I have some comments on that. This was sort of an awkward way through the garage, and so you asked us to look at that a little more closely. And then if there was a way to increase the bicycle parking, that would be something that would be very positive. So we've responded to all of these at the June hearing, and I believe that our response was well received. The setback along Hamilton, we've moved the building in 3 feet. To better align with the AT&T building. That is about as tight as we can go because of the requirements for the parking stalls, and so we're at minimums on some of these parking stalls, but allows for the pedestrian alley. And the pedestrian alley, Board Member Liu, is needed because of constructability issues, to avoid underpinning of the Taipan building, to allow our joint trench utilities to come in that way, and we need it for light air ventilation in order to go or in order to propose this naturally ventilated parking garage, so we don't have to have mechanical ventilation for the floors above grade. And I contend that it's also a great way to give people choice on moving through the community when they come down the stair, which is at the intersection. You know where the intersection is. The pedestrian pathway through the building. So the whole first floor has been second floor has been raised a foot. So a little bit more light when you come in. This left-hand side is essentially all committed to bikes and bike signage and stroller parking, and then a more deliberate pathway across the garage that is aligned with the pedestrian alley that then also is coupled with the stair that comes down from the floors above is also in that corner. And you can either decide to go on the alley behind Taipan and Cogden and Chrome and Prolific Oven, or you can decide to walk straight out to Waverly Street through the pedestrian pathway. And then this is the expansion of the bike area. It's increased by about 50%. So those comments were, or changes were all well received in June. However, there were some comments on the elevations that I just wanted to go through and show you the changes that we've made. So on the Hamilton elevation, we have this pattern of vertical fins that provide a sort of varying view into the building as you walk past it because it'll change. And so there was some thought that maybe they were a little bit too dominant, so we were asked to investigate ways to lessen the impact maybe of those fins. Make the bike and pedestrian entrance, which is down in this area here, a little bit more prominent or inviting, and add amenities at this corner sidewalk and plaza there along Hamilton. So the changes, I'm just going to go to the large scale because I can't see it this far away, I apologize. The changes are, we've on the ground floor have added an additional bench, so we've shifted the entire built-in planter toward the stairwell. So now the planter goes to here, and that allowed us to pick up a bench right here. So now there's 4 benches along the frontage. We've reduced the fins at the upper floor in this center part here. This cursor's not working real well. Anyway, you know where. And we've introduced metalwork railings that would be reminiscent of the metalwork railings we have on the ground floor behind all the benches and the built-in planters. At the bike entrance, we've taken the board form concrete around to the bike entrance, and we've introduced open rails. This is on the far left-hand side of the drawing, open rails on the levels above to make it a little bit more transparent. And then we've introduced a graphic in perforated metal, basically, that symbolizes bikes, all right? So there's an image of a bike there, and that image continues as you move through the building. At the plaza area, we've incorporated another bench into the stair as it comes down to the plaza. And then we think any other seating opportunities there, and this is in conference with the landscape architect, would really need to be something that's promoted by the tenant that's in that space. And if they have tables and chairs they want to pull out there, perhaps that's a way to animate that space. Waverly facade, same thing. You know, look at the fins and add some amenities in the plaza. And so again, I'm going to go to the large scale elevation. I've already discussed the amenity in the plaza, which is the bench that we've added. In a similar way, we've reduced the fins down and created this railing that starts to form a cap to the building. And we also no longer are wrapping the 2 corners with the fins. So if you recall before, we were wrapping the 2 corners with the fins. Now we're not. The fins are merely infill, all right, and reduced in height. Lastly, this wasn't something that the board commented on, but we've added a horizontal mullion at the retail transom just to give it a little bit different scale and to increase the horizontality of that facade with the canopy above. On the pedestrian alley side in the back of the building, really it was a matter of what's the selection on the plant material. And so I think we looked at a lilac vine, and we looked at the grape, the California grape, which I'm told is not going to attract winemakers, all right, but it might attract birds. But the fruit is very small on the California vine, so I thought I would just preempt that question. And so there's really no change to that, although the planters are all now consistently drawn the same height, all right? So the planters in the pedestrian way at the back of the building and the alleyway behind Taipan and Prolific Oven are all now at 36 inches approximately. And those are all C3 drain-through type planters as well. So we have some new images right off the press from yesterday morning that are not in your set, all right? So this is a view from in front of the building, basically on Waverly. We have the board form concrete at the lower levels. We have the terracotta colored fins, the bronze metalwork, and the clear glass at the retail. You can look down the alley. This is from, obviously across the street. It shows the corner stair element where, again, we have the bronze perforated metal that has tapestry on it, which is the public art. Tapestry has already been approved by the Public Art Commission, and it's an abstract representation of not the flatlands, but the foothills that surround Palo Alto. And so it creates an interesting graphic on that screen. And we have it at this location, and we have it at the far end that you'll see in a minute. This is the sort of a close-up of the stair, and so we've incorporated the bench here and then extended the planter over on this side in front of the elevator. And then the railings for the stair descend down and provide kind of a back a backdrop to that bench so no one falls into the stair that then descends down to the garage level, showing just some idea of furniture that could be possibly out there. And then a photographic representation of the building from down Waverly Street, looking, kind of getting an idea what it would look like in the context. And you don't really see the post office because of the trees. And then on Hamilton Avenue, looking the other direction. So it's broken up quite nicely, I think. It integrates, it's a big building, but it integrates well. And then this is the other location of the perforated panel. And this horizontal line here is picked up in that horizontal canopy that we have on Hamilton. And then this is just our rendering of showing you how that bench, the additional bench would look and how those benches occur there with the metalwork behind, and that metalwork then would match the railings above. If you have your bicycle, you would enter here. Here's the perforated graphic of the bike and the entrance, and as you come in, you'd be entering on the left-hand side, and this is sort of the drive aisle side, but you'd see this pattern of images of bikes, basically, that would be in this perforated screen to provide secure bike area, but communicate what's going on there. And then we're thinking of a bright color in there so that when you're in the alley coming from Waverly looking down, you kind of actually in the distance can see the color in the garage and then the screen of the perf metal in front of the bike storage area. And then this is looking the other way. You see the festoon lighting in the alleyway, the plant material, the special paving. The paving won't be contrasting like that. I think that's a shadow thing going on here. So the paving's more consistent. I apologize for that. More like that. And this is the back alleyway, again, with an opportunity for bench. There was a discussion, should this bench be movable? Right now we're showing it more fixed in this rendering. And then the very rear, and I believe that's, this is just an explanation of tapestry, but I think we covered that probably last time. And that's my presentation. Thank you for the extra time. It's much
You're
better
welcome.
when you
We'll
don't have to
extend the
rush.
same courtesy to the public.
Good.
Any questions of this?
Yeah, I have one question. Ken, on the Hamilton Avenue side, the concrete portion, depending on which one you look at, the square openings are either there or not there. Which one is it?
It's
On
this
this
one
one,
here.
it doesn't really appear to be there other than just,
The square, they're depressions, so they're not
well, at one
see-through.
point, they looked like they were completely all the way through. They're openings.
They're not openings. There was an issue with the shear wall, so they're recesses in the concrete.
Oh, okay,
Right, they're recesses. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But they are there.
Anything else before we hear from the public?
Yes, Architect Hayes. And the same thing Robert's talking about. I've noticed the Art Commission seemed to present images of irregular rounded shapes on that same wall rather than the rectilinear squares. Do you have an opinion as the architect what's appropriate for the architecture of the building?
It's a very good question. We've gone back and forth on this. I like the interest in the proposal by the artist. I think that is a concept that your public art coordinator, Elise DeMarzo, is also supportive of. And I could see it working. I'm not sure what the how we're going to accomplish it, if that's something that we want to go. But I also don't mind just the simplicity of what we have here with the vines growing on it. I don't know if we have the vines with the other concept, whether or not you're going to read through this undulating facade that picks up on that tapestry kind of pattern. So I'd be interested to hear your opinion. I'm a bit on the fence, I think, in terms of which way to go. I don't mind the simple version if we're going to have the vines.
Thank you.
I have one speaker card, Elizabeth Wong.
My name is Elizabeth Wong. I represent Waverly Post, which is the owner of 560 Waverly, the building adjacent to this parking lot. If there are not enough people in the audience, it's probably because they never received a notification of this ARB meeting. The only reason I'm here is because I received an email, and I checked my mailbox yesterday, and there was no notification. I have several buildings in town, and I did not receive a single card. So I wanted to talk about a few things concerning this building and this. Okay, so one of the reasons why I spoke so adamantly against the fence is because this is a view of my property, and you will see from these windows, I can see the post office, which is amazing, an amazing view, and that the fence totally blocked the view. And I thought it was, for the people in the parking lot, it would be a loss, of a lost opportunity to see the beautiful building that the post office is. Amy, could you show them the next one? Okay, so I also wanted to voice some of my other opinions. I have a neighbor that is building a 50-foot underground, 3 stories. There's going to be a basketball court there, and secant walls, and I don't see why this building could not have 40 feet underground and include 3 levels of underground parking. I think that we don't have space in the city for parking spaces, and this is an opportunity to build a garage that will stay there forever. So I would like to see, it would have been my preference to see the art going horizontal instead of vertical, because it's really hard to see vertical in a very small area of downtown. So I wanted to also repeat or add that I had no conversations or correspondence with anybody since the last ARB meeting. So I don't know who they talked to, but they did not include me. I also wanted to ask you if the panels on top of the 4th floor, are they solar panels? And what is the height of that solar panel? I'm interested in knowing that. Basically, those are the things. I think that there's another view that you can see the post office really, really well. Can you see the next slide? Yeah, so this is the kind of view that you would lose. And if you had an open parking space, 4 or 5 levels of parking with open, it would be a less massive building with a splendid view of the area, right? Thank you. Oh, one more thing, and that is the access, from to the back of my building. That is a big, big issue, and that it will not go away. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mrs. Wong before she? Okay. Anybody else wish to speak on this project? All right. Any comments from staff on the?
When we continue a meeting to just generally to a date certain, we do not send out additional notice cards. It's a city expense that we don't go to the trouble to do because it is a date certain and made in
So at our last
hearing.
meeting, we announced that this would be heard on this date.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, any questions of staff or of the applicant?
Can we start?
Sure.
Okay. I think this is an improvement over what we've seen, and I think the third time definitely helped. It's interesting, there are a couple of things. The various changes that you made, I think, are all in the right direction, and I think, as far as I'm concerned, this is approvable at this point. There are some items that I guess are still somewhat in flux, but so I'll just sort of throw out my opinion. The tapestry, as is shown on here, I happen to like that. I mean, I know it seems like it didn't really work at Stanford, but I think because, first of all, this is also, you could see through it, and I think it just makes a unique if nothing else, it's almost, you look at it, you go, what the heck is that? It draws you to it a little bit more. But I do find it strange that if this is done, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me to put the original design skin on there and then take that down and put the tapestry on, so we just do one in lieu of the other completely. And secondly, I happen to like the framing for the solar panels. I think it helps the building rather than hinders. I'd like to see, even if they don't put the solar panels on, I'd like to see the frame up there to counterbalance what's going on the base of the building. So I think it actually is a help to it, especially with the new design of the railing on top. It just gives it a nice finished top floor to it. So like I said, I can approve the project or forward it on at this point the way it is now.
Alex?
Yes, so thank you, Ken, and thank you for staff for all the hard work on this project. I can also recommend approval of the project today. Previously, I had like 3 major reservations. So one was the 4 dead-end aisles inside the garage, the narrow alley between the Taipan restaurant and the project, and also before I think you were encroaching me as much as like 6 or 7 feet into this special setback, and I thought that it was sort of short-sighted. Like I understand I understood the logic of it, but it really seemed short-sighted to me. Given how hard it is to regain right-of-way space, in the future when we actually, if we ever need it. So anyway, I think the building is handsome. It is big. I understand Ken's design strategy, and I think that you've done a really great job with given that approach. I do want to throw out there that there's a different way of designing a big garage like this. In Beverly Hills, there are 2 garages. They're public garages. One's at like 345 North Beverly Drive. It has like a Williams-Sonoma on the ground floor. And it's 3 stories. And then they have another one, which is 9510 Brighton Way, which is 5 levels. And that has ground floor retail, and that's on Rodeo Drive. And they look like buildings. Like you would never think that they're parking garages. They would be more expensive than what you're showing today. They may be out of the budget of this particular project. But if you just walk down the street, you would not know that you wouldn't really think that they're a garage, and they blend in. And I think as good of a job as you've done on this project, it's still going to look like a big garage, especially the Hamilton facade. I think you've done everything that you can do on the Waverly facade. I think the retail helps. But it's going to be big, and I think we should expect some criticism of the bulk from it. If you think about all the criticism that we've gotten over like the 636 Waverly project, like this is going to be a pretty big shock to the system in Palo Alto, and I think we're just going to have to be prepared for it, and it's responding to a need for parking. So that's the way I'm looking at it. I think there were a lot of good changes in the last revision. The photovoltaics structure, the columns, the changes to the fins. I think that those are all really important, and I think that they do help. Okay, so the only things that I have on my list now that I think aren't completely addressed is the concrete color, which I think you're calling out as natural. My understanding is there isn't really such a thing as natural concrete. Like even sidewalks are colored with lamp black. So I think we need to see something, and I would prefer to see something warmer, like a warmer color than cooler color. I can understand the logic of trying to match the concrete to having like a light colored concrete, a gray colored concrete to match the All Saints Church. But then at the same time, I'm thinking like churches should be separate and distinct from the rest of the fabric. I did look at the 636 Waverly building and the color of that in context with all the warm colors on the block, and it seems off to me. It seems like it stands out too much from the neighbors. I think that the board should discuss some provision for signs on placement of signs for the retail storefront. That's mostly because your awning is really high. You don't have a lot of space above the doors, like the transoms. Yeah, you can hang a sign, or a provision for blade signs on the columns, or something. I think we have to something. I'm also concerned about graffiti on the board form concrete, and I want to know if you're proposing to put the coating, like a graffiti coating on the concrete, or if the city's going to paint it afterwards, or if you're going to use chemical cleaners, which never completely remove all of the paint. Yeah, okay, and then so I did want to address Elizabeth Wong's comment about the fins. And so if I look at the site plan, I think that you're not going to, even if the fins were removed, I don't think it's going to help the view through the garage, because there's the stair and the elevator and the shear wall. I think the other thing is that I think the way you have Ken has designed the fins now, I think looks good. I think that we have another garage over at the Hoover Building in Stanford where the fins are 4 feet apart, and it doesn't work at all. It doesn't look good. So I think they do need to be fairly closely spaced. I would say that there is an alternate, like we have the Bryant Street garage. It just has like a grid, and it looks more like a window, like a window frame, and not fins. And I think that works actually pretty well. But at the moment, I think I'm recommending no change with regard to that. I did visit the site this morning. I do think that there is an issue with service vehicles and loading in the mornings for the CVS store and the restaurant, and then later in the day for the Apple store. I think that is an issue. I think loading it from the street side is feasible in the early morning, because there's generally not a lot of parking. There aren't a lot of cars parked in the morning. And I do see restaurants, say like on Emerson Street, that have restaurant loading in the morning in the street. They just block the street. So I think that can work. But I think we do have to resolve all of that, and I don't see all of the details in here. So anyway, again, that's all that I have. I can recommend approval of the project today.
Peter.
Through the chair, could I ask a question of the architect, please?
Yes.
Architect Hayes, I have a question for you about the concrete shear wall and the what you explained were decorative penetrations. I originally understood those to be windows through the shear wall, so you'd have a glancing view, a frame of the post office. Is that a possibility to do that still?
We can certainly investigate that more, but that was the original conception. But in working with the structural in Watry's office, it presented some problems for them to be able to get the lateral forces to transfer down the shear wall.
The openings are very small. It seems that the shear strength would not be dramatically affected. Thank you.
Yep.
I find myself able to recommend approval of this project. I think the changes have been for the good, and I'm very pleased with the way it looks now. I'm very appreciative of the architect and staff for modifying the facade a little bit with the top cornice line. I am concerned that the building is much better with the photovoltaic canopy on the top, and the reality is that the canopy is something like 56 feet up, so it's higher than the current sacred 50-foot height limit, and this is going before City Council for a vote. I'd like to give them some ammunition that the architecture board thinks the building is significantly better with the photovoltaic canopy. Fully understanding that it's higher than the current 50-foot limit, we still think it's an improvement on the building and should be retained. At least put it really loud and clear to everybody what's going on. My second and only other issue is regarding that concrete shear wall. I think it's much better if you have rectilinear openings through it that people can see out of. Perhaps also modify the color or just take into account what Alex was saying about toning down the coldness of the gray concrete. I think the metal covering on the stairs will be a nice feature, having the public art there, and I'm all in favor of keeping it there, but I don't think it needs to be extended to the concrete shear wall. I find the rectilinear grid somehow sinks in with the building as an architectural element, and I think it's a loss not to have those peekaboo windows out to the post office that we were originally discussing. So I'd like to recommend that, I guess that concrete shear wall come back on a consent or just a recommendation to staff to check the color of the concrete and see if we can't get openings through it. Aside from that, I'm grateful to the staff for all the work that's gone through and the architects for getting this building to where it is now. Thank you.
Can I just interject one item? I agree completely. And that's why I asked the question about the openings in the concrete wall. And I think it looks I think it'd be much better if the openings were there. And I also know, having dealt with enough structural engineers, that they're going to scream and moan and everything else, and then if you put your foot down, it's amazing how it gets done. So I mean, I don't buy it that it has to be that way. I mean, I accepted your your answer, because I know you probably asked the structural engineer. They said, no, I need that wall solid, but they don't. It just isn't. It's amazing how I've always gotten my way if you really push a little bit.
I'm trying to judge by facial expressions how many architects are out there and how many engineers are out there. Getting a lot of audience reaction. I'm a non-combatant in this particular one.
It's a few more rebars win, that's all.
That's what I figured. Little steel. Sorry about the tariffs.
I would just interrupt for 1 second. So there's the internal joke, like if you're having a meeting with architects and engineers, the engineers show up 10 minutes early and the architects show up 10 minutes late. And that's reflective of, I think, structural design as well.
I see. And the extroverted engineers are the ones who look at your shoes, right? Okay. I think it looks like a handsome building. I'm really pleased. I share Elizabeth Wong's sorrow at the loss of that view of the post office, but it's going to happen with this building program. I'm grateful that you did carve out the corner on Waverly so that as people come down that street, they have a bit more of a glimpse of that beautiful building across the street. That beautiful civic building across the street, built as a Depression project, with a feeling that civic buildings should look good. They should look like we care about our common purposes in our public buildings, that they shouldn't be the cheapest possible, but they should be the most satisfying we can do. And in this last set of drawings, I have the sense that this is a huge structure, it's a parking structure, but it's also a handsome structure, and we could be proud of it. I think a really important thing with a building of this size is what the experience is walking by it or even driving by it close up. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be a big improvement over our current experience. We do sit up here and carp a lot, but we also do appreciate what you're doing. There's going to be a much better bicycle and pedestrian experience. I am not going to be locking my bike in the midst of the ivy. I am not going to be dodging cars backing up into me, because there is no pedestrian path at this point that doesn't involve cars backing up into you. I'm going to be interested. I really like your new walking through the lower level. I'm really glad that we discussed and you were able to raise that floor level on the ground. I think that this is really, for all the fact that it's housing for many, many cars, a pretty multimodal project. I agree that we need to think about where the signage is going to go. I'm delighted that we have a public art element here, and it looks like a beautiful one. On the concrete color, I do not like that cold gray. I don't think, and I don't know if it really is cold, I don't think that it's the concrete across the street in the church that we should be picking up on. I think it's the other civic building, which is the post office. I want to know that it's going to enhance that. So which one am I looking at?
Yes, they have.
Yeah, I don't like it. I saw it, I looked at it in a bigger context, I still don't like it. And I think the context is the post office. I do think that this is wonderful for us in terms of a city building and solar panels, because we have been not happy with retrofitted solar panels on parking garages. We have thought that they looked horrible, to use a technical term. These finish the building. They make it lighter, they make it soar, they make it float, they make it ecologically more optimistic. They're great. I really like the altered railings up on the top. Again, I think those are great design elements. I have the sense that this building, when it's built in full, can make us proud in the same way that our post office does, while we reflect on the changes in the way the world is organized between the point when the post office was the most important thing we had and when the parking garage still was. 56 feet or whatever is a lot of height, but the building next to it's 75. So this is one of the very few places in the city where I think downtown, where I think you could do this. And it wouldn't be a bad thing. I was very concerned about the pulling it back as far as possible. I think you've done that. And I also realize that by having the wider sidewalk, you give a sense of bigger pullback, even though the building facade is not further back. So I very much appreciate the wider sidewalks. What else did I want to say? I agree that the windows would be much better. I am concerned about loading and how that's going to work. Well, I know that this building is much more deferential to the 550 Waverly building than a standard, than if we continue the development pattern along that street all the way to the corner, which has 0 setback. This is a different situation. It's a deep building and it's a tall building, and I am persuaded that moving it back isn't going to work, and I'm almost ready to be persuaded that that will be an attractive place to walk through. I am persuaded that it will be a much better place for people working there. Our code says we're supposed to have seating areas and whatnot, not just for customers, but for employees, and we're all used to the sight of workers on their breaks sitting on standpipes or curbs or boxes overturned, and I'm glad that we're going to have seating. In one of the drawings of the seating proposals, it shows what I think of as architecturally lovely but not comfortable seating. The timber form colossus, I can't tell how tall that is, but it looks a little short. I hope it's at least 30 inches or thereabouts. I'm looking at sheet.
The bench?
Yeah.
This microphone. John.
Yes. Please.
Yeah, it's John Potus with Merrill Morris, landscape architect.
Thank you. Benches are 18 inches high, similar to a chair. So,
Okay, I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself for the record?
my name is John Potus, landscape architect with Merrill Morris Partners. Thank you.
Thank you.
But benches are generally 18 inches high, and that's about the same height as a chair.
I thought a chair was, the chair seat, isn't the chair seat 30?
30
It's
would be the
18.
table height. It's about the
Oh,
height
fine, good,
your
lovely.
wrist is generally
You're
about
right, it's
30
12.
inches.
I just measured
Yeah.
my seat this morning, it's 12 plus 6, you're right. Good. So people can sit down in them.
Thank you.
And they're both the same height? The timber form is just photographed to look lower? You have bench options for the alley passageway.
So there are benches, this is Ken Hayes, there are benches in the alleyway, which would be these timber
And
timber
they're
form.
the
And
same height?
then there are benches on the Hamilton frontage, and those are integrated, cantilevered off the architecture.
Right, and as photographed, you present these to us as options in sheet ARB 4.2, and as photographed, the timber form colossus looked really low. Is that an illusion? They're both the same height?
We're getting the image up, but it might be that the Colossus looks lower because it's a longer bench in that image.
Could be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so it will be seat height. They will both be seat height, whether they're
My point is,
integrated.
of course, that I want a bench that I can sit down on and stand up from, even if I am not in peak health, which means occasionally you need something to lean on.
Yeah, with sitting up, generally having an arm on the bench will aid with, giving yourself
Exactly.
leverage.
Exactly.
And with the other,
Can you get that with an arm?
the Colossus would not normally come with an arm. The Colossus name is it's a big hunk of wood. And so I think of Palo Alto trees, even though it's a dead tree, it's, a nice hunk of wood. But with the other bench, you can get arms. And also the other bench, I thought, would be more complementary to the built-in benches. But again, I wanted to give you
Well,
some
I'm all in, I mean, I love great big hunks of wood and all that, but not, and we have lots of people to whom they will not need any assistance, but take a look at the CVS clientele. You've got a lot of people who need help getting up and down. So
The benches in front of the building on Hamilton do have
I
rails.
understand that they do. But I'm in favor of universal design. Okay. I think that's all. So, but my overall feeling is pleasure that we have, I think, gotten to a building which will be pleasant to experience, that will enhance alternative forms of moving about, and that will meet the city council's project, which says we need a lot more parking in this area. I also hear commentary which leads me to think that we should consider a subcommittee. I am prepared to vote for this. I think there's some items that need further work, and I think I would suggest that a subcommittee is the appropriate way to do that. I'm happy to delegate it to two of you. I don't think my participation is needed. And the issues, I think, would be, unless you want to talk about it now, signage placement, concrete color, and the piercing or not of the shear wall on Hamilton. Was there something else? Oh, and loading. How loading's going to be handled? Or do you think that's not necessary? Colleagues. Well, I'm actually asking if you're supportive of that approach.
I have a question for staff. So I think Wynn was asking about loading, and is that actually part of the ARB purview? Because that's something in the street right of way. And I think in the discussions in the past, that's not really been, I think that's been excluded
Correct.
from our scope.
Yes,
I
I
think
would
we can make a statement to the council, right? We can make a recommendation, but it's not our.
Transportation office, the Office of Transportation would be reviewing, where exactly that would be placed and, relationship to the
So what I'm thinking
parking
about
spaces.
is that we're required to find that it's functional. And if there's something about the parking garage itself in relationship to these public alleyways that is making it dysfunctional for loading, then it would be something we should be thinking about. If we don't think there's anything to be done with respect to the building itself, that we're satisfied it can be done elsewhere, then I agree with you.
Could I interject that with the AR findings, architectural review findings on circulation, if you would like to, wordsmith that to note, loading space with the provision of a loading space on Waverly, something to that effect, the details of where that loading space is along the block is something that would be worked out, but, having a loading space period.
Allows the building and the adjacent buildings to
Yeah, if
function.
you'd like to think of it.
That's helpful, thank you. Not actually an issue I raised. Okay. Does somebody want to make further discussion, or does somebody want to make a motion, which we can then discuss?
I'm happy to make a motion that we I move that we recommend approval of this project with the following conditions. Or actually, before even doing condition, I'd like to find, in the findings we need to make, I'd like to insert a sentence regarding the importance of the photovoltaic panels. Staff, can you help me locate where the best place to put that would be, please?
I think it's
Is there
2.
draft findings in here?
Well, I think it should be more than just a sentence. I think I think they really do help the overall design of the building.
Yeah, I agree. Do we have
I
draft
think,
findings in here,
yes, we
Amy?
do. They're on pages 7. They're not highlighted the way they usually are, so they're a little harder to find. They start on page 17? Oh, wait a minute, yeah. Actually, they start earlier. It's just they're laid out in a very different way.
So there is on package page 20 is the
On page
ARB.
what?
Packet page 20.
Right,
There is the ARB finding number 6.
right, but they start earlier, right? They start.
Correct.
It's very odd because we've got,
We
I
do
have a
have
hard time finding number 1.
We do have a fair number of comp plan policies for this project, so number 1 actually starts on
Oh, right, so the
packet
top
page
of
14.
page 2, right,
Packet page 14.
right. So I think it's finding number 2 that the project has unified and coherent design.
Yes, so I would like to see us add
A bullet on
in
2A.
that, in findings number 2, that the photovoltaic panels on the top of the building significantly aid in making the building a harmonious transition in scale, mass, and character with the community.
We say, and supporting structures? Photovoltaic panels and supporting structure?
That's great. You're good with words, Wynn. Help me figure that one out.
I think one place to put it is 2A, is a third bullet. Oh, sorry, never mind, wrong place. Yeah, you're right, goes in 2D. So the photovoltaic panels and supporting structures,
Is the focus the supporting structure for the
it's the
panels?
whole thing, and it just, but yes, go ahead.
Well,
So,
The building looks unfinished without them is my problem.
Alex,
I think my inclination would be to just have it include the structure and not the panels themselves, because we've got all sorts of state acts, like we have 2
Okay.
solar shading acts and stuff, and I'm thinking it's maybe better if we just,
I agree with you, Alex.
That the
It's
structures are all we
It's
need.
the structure that we're after,
yeah.
and we just need to use those words.
Okay, the photovoltaic support structures,
So that's the,
I think it was finishing the building, but you said something else. Provide an elegant top to the building. Top, bottom, and middle. Does the architect care to comment? Why they're good?
It terminates the top of the building. It gives it a,
Okay, provides an elegant cornice.
there you go.
Effective?
what I wanted to do, Wynn, was use the language in the findings and
All
say
right.
that this superstructure is important in helping the building achieve a harmonious transition in scale, mass, and character with the adjacent
There you go.
buildings.
That sounds good.
All right.
The-
Let's say it provides a cornice and, so then we got the fact and the
I'm trying
conclusion
to
of law.
give council what they need to hear, that this is the language they wrote.
Yes.
This building does that
And then can we
better
add a
with-
sentence? Yeah, because it has a lot to do with the height, does it? So, and then can we add another sentence that the 75-foot height of the adjacent building
I think that's already here.
is already, all right,
It's bullet point number 3.
perfect.
Yes.
Some of these things, I have read them, you can see my marks, but I don't remember them all, obviously. Okay.
The
Do you
second-
have something, staff, that will work? You clear on what we said?
Yeah, I think you noted under 2A, the third bullet, the photovoltaic supporting structure on the top of the building.
It should be 2D, I'm sorry.
Oh, 2D, okay. The photovoltaic supporting structure on the top of the building it provides an elegant top, and there's something about significant and some other verbiage.
And it's important. It's
Important.
important in helping the building achieve.
Yeah.
Then
you.
use the language from the findings, helping the building achieve
Harmonious transitions.
harmonious transition in mass scale character with the adjacent buildings.
Perfect.
Then I'd like to make a condition that the openings in the concrete shear wall remain as openings, as we've been originally shown. It's not a come back to us on consent, to just make them openings. I believe that can be done. Then I'd like to have a second condition that the color of the concrete come back on a consent calendar after the architect's given a little more thought to how to tone down the harshness of the colored concrete. And then,
All right, yeah, Board Member Balte, are you asking that to be on consent or on subcommittee?
what? Subcommittee, I think is, I'm sorry, I missed
Thank
one.
you.
Assuming the rest of the board is up for that. And then the signage, is that something we can expect to have come back at the same subcommittee?
Once we receive an application for staff-level architectural review, we can bring that to the subcommittee.
I think our problem's different. The question is, what are the locations on the building that any signs could go? So I think that's why we want to think about it now,
I think they ought to.
not the content of the signs.
Yeah.
So I think you've done that for us
could
before.
come back to the subcommittee.
The other choice we would have is could we not recommend that a master sign program be included as part of the project? And that doesn't mean it would happen. I think we were
Isn't
saying
there
that
only
it would.
Isn't there only one sign?
There's usually sign for the garage itself. I mean, we name the garages, and
True.
there's a whole. Yeah.
Yes.
Ken Hayes, there is a master sign program in the drawing set for the parking-related elements that the
Yeah.
city has adopted for the garages.
So could that just be expanded to include the commercial?
It's the retail.
We're just talking
signage
the
we're
retail
about.
store.
Yeah, just expand it to include the retail signage too. It can't be that hard just to say you're going to have.
We can
two
locate,
banners.
yeah,
Okay.
we can locate, options for where the signage could be incorporated. That's easy.
It'll help everybody if you do that. At least that's the baseline.
The tenant
you know
will
is
want to see
already
that too,
approved.
yeah.
Those are the only conditions I'd like to add. I do not think we should put anything about loading on the
All right.
architecture board. So that's my motion.
Could I ask a clarification? The openings in the concrete, you said that would not go to subcommittee? That's just
That
a,
would not go to
It'd be a
subcommittee. We're
condition
just saying that should
that
be,
they be
it's one of the
retained.
conditions of approval is
Okay,
that
thank
the
you.
opening be retained as openings.
Okay, I'll second that.
Any discussion?
No, there's no if possible on that condition. It just says it. Robert just seconded.
Keep in mind, we are a recommending body. Any other comments before we vote?
Do we have a second?
Yes, Robert. I always forget to summarize that. Okay, on a motion by Board Member Balte, second by Board Member Guyer, to recommend approval as previously stated. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Congratulations, thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Last time we did if possible, Alex.
so it doesn't absorb water.
Wow. Okay.
Heather Young was always talking about this, and I had never really looked into it.
There's a flyer there with the specs on it, right in that pile of papers there.
This?
It's a feeling like all that Parklex and all that stuff. I'm just wondering if that, like, we think it's also cool now, but in like
We're going to
10
regret
years,
this.
it's going to be like, they're like plywood sheets. Oh, that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's all over, like, we've done research, all of this.
Yeah, it's that, basically glorified kind of formica. It's an image
Really?
of wood that's glued onto some resin back.
Sounds like a horrible idea.
Well, you know, the thing is that the fakes now are really pretty good fakes.
That even makes your body even more
It's like
unhappy.
porcelain tile, you know, it's all photographed.
Alex, it's about the installation. It's all about the edges on that stuff. And if you do it well,
Yeah, I know,
it can be good. If you do it bad,
So tell me this again about porcelain tile.
It's a photograph. Basically, it's a photograph of anything, marble,
Okay.
whatever.
Oh, you can put any image you want. Well, I think I react viscerally to fake wood more strongly than to different forms of ceramic or plastic. I actually used to live in this great house built in 1950 with fabulous formica.
one of our clients like tile floors made to look like wood floors. So strips of porcelain tile.
But they hurt.
This is to believe.
Tile floors hurt.
If you want a tile floor, but it's just like tile, not wood.
Oh, yeah.
But the photo simulation I was talking about is really striking. I mean, it's still the grout lines.
It's creepy.
It's not the same thing.
It's creepy.
But the other way to look at it is.
It doesn't breathe.
In a situation
I guess you don't want it to breathe.
10 years, if it goes to hell, you can't relatively easily replace it with something else.
Shall we open our here? Are we ready to go?
Yeah.
We were. Okay, we will still be recessed. Excuse me, I just had a question about our last project. How many square feet is that parking garage above ground?
Right.
Well, I do, but I can't tell.
Should normally be on the front page, but we can take a look.
Okay. All right. Well, we will go on to our next item, which is a public hearing on 181 El Camino Real, which is to stay the Stanford Shopping Center. This is a request for architect's review And a conditional use permit, though not from us, for Shake Shack Restaurant to allow for exterior facade improvements and to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages in an existing tenant space at the Stanford Shopping Center. It is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. This was formerly the Wells Fargo Bank building next to P.F. Chang Restaurant. Does anybody have any conversations to disclose? And we have all visited the site. Staff, if you could proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Board. My name is Samuel Gutierrez. I'm the Associate Planner assigned to this project. This is at the Stanford Shopping Center, and we went to hearing previously, and the Board had some comments and concerns. So the applicant and I worked on that and came up with some different designs that address some of the comments and concerns expressed by the Board previously. So let's start the presentation here. Just to go back, the Stanford Shopping Center has a wide variety of retail tenants, restaurants, some kind of day spa uses, hair salons, etc. So they have a wide range of different facades throughout the shopping center. It's typical of a shopping center, especially an outdoor one. As we move on, we can see that this is the existing conditions here. You could see the Wells Fargo ATMs on the upper left photo there, and you could see that the building has a bit of a point to the right. It is a triangular building, and it is visible, somewhat visible through the tree line during the fall seasons. You can see that in the lower left photo there. I circled it. From Quarry Road, it is mainly blocked by that plaza with the trees, but the Wells Fargo and with that ATM still existing there, that is somewhat, again, visible from El Camino. So it's partially visible from the public right-of-way, but it is also partially obscured by the planting that's there at the site. As we go through, we can see that the changes from before is that we do have new public seating. I'll go into that later. Landscaping has been modified, and just to hit some key points, since the board members were not here before, the change of use from financial services to eating and drinking use, a restaurant, does change the parking because they are utilizing the outdoor patio, or the Wells Fargo Bank did not utilize that. They just used it as a refuge. Now there's actually seating there, though the Stanford Shopping Center does have a large excess of parking, so it's not really an issue. Moving on to the board's concerns here, last time this went before you, there was concerns regarding the landscaping. There was lavender being utilized before, and there was concerns about bees being attracted and that not being compatible with an eating establishment. You have people sitting outside and bees buzzing around. Also, some of the landscape choices were not drought resistant or indigenous plants. So the applicant did prepare an updated revised landscape plan that includes native drought resistant plants, and did remove the lavender to address the bee issue. The other concern was the durability of the cedar wood that was proposed the first time around. And the board suggested using an alternative material or painting the existing brick facade. The applicant now has proposed two options in this submittal. Before you, there's one with the painted brick facade option, and then there's another one with a wood option with an alternative wood. It's an Akoya treated wood as opposed to the cedar that was proposed before. The board did say that there should be more focus on the triangular portion of the point of the building for public seating, since it was observed that people were kind of lack seating in that area. So the applicant did prepare their site plan according to that, and are proposing 4 new benches. That's shown on the site plan. And The board members weren't supportive at the time, 2 of the 3 were not supportive of there was a burger logo on the new trash enclosure, so the applicant did remove that. Moving forward, we can see here the landscaping, just a general site plan. That did not change, just the planning scheme. So they didn't increase the landscape area or decrease it from before. Here we could see the landscape options. They are California native plants, and they are more drought resistant than the previous selection that went before you. Moving on here, this is the first facade option with the painted brick. You'll see that it's just painted throughout on this side. This is the side that would face quarry, and it was partially obscured by that meadow of trees. Here's the same side with the Akoya wood. You can see the difference here. It's the lower portion of the facade now has wood. And here's the parking lot side that you could see from El Camino through the trees again. This is the painted brick option. At the back of house side, I would like to call it, where the trash room doors are there on the right, you'll see that it's painted a light gray, the brick continues, and the left. And that's painted in ash color. There's actually a sample up there for you. Here's the same side with the Akoya wood option, very similar to the previous option that you've seen before. Moving here to the public seating, this is a zoomed in area of the site plan, highlighted in yellow. You could see the location of the new benches. It is made of aluminum, looks very modern, nice. It has a back and arm rests, so there's the options there. There's also a spec sheet available for you. And we are recommending approval of the project with, let me start over. There was a modification to the conditions of approval in the submitted staff report. The condition number 4, yes, that was handed to you, and that's available for the public. We did specifically state that the 4 new benches, the public seating condition, would require it to be of that Metro 40 style or an equivalent style and quality, because they are proposing a nice aluminum bench. And in case that does not happen to be available at the time of installation, they could go seek an alternative that's very similar. So that is a change there that's brought before you.
And that's condition number 14?
Correct.
Thank you.
And with that change there, we'd recommend approval of the project to the Director of Planning and Community Environment based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval. Thank you.
Any questions of staff before we hear from the applicant? Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Ready to go? Good morning. I'm Justin Kyle of Michael Shu's Office of Architecture in Austin, Texas. Do you need me to spell my name for the record?
That would be nice. Thank
Okay.
you.
Justin, Justin, Kyle, Kyle. Sammy gave a good overview of the project. In general, our reason why we're here today is to address the concerns the board brought up at the last discussion. The, I guess, major element that we've been looking at is one of the questions of providing adequate seating for the area. Discussed the benches. We coordinated with the Stanford Shopping Center to find the bench specification that they would like and provide 4 different options for those bench locations and at the areas in general where the board recommended at a last discussion. Then overviewing on the landscaping requirement, looking at drought-resistant plants, based upon recommendations that we found using resources on the Palo Alto website, as well as working with other members within our design team that have done work in the California area and the Bay Area and specifically. So these are the specifications that we came up with, and of course we can modify as needed per the board's recommendations. So for the big item here, we were looking at the facade options on the exterior of the building. Per the board's recommendation, we looked at an alternative option versus the wood, but we also kept a wood option within this package because we do feel as for the design, it is the best design option for this project. It gives a human scale to the project, also brings a warmth into it, and at the level of interactivity between the patrons and at that level of the building. This wood is not a cedar, it's not a teak. We're looking at not a composite wood, it is actual wood, but it goes through a process, a acetylated process, and we have more information, documentation I can discuss here in a moment. Doing some research on this, we looked at this product is not only a good fit for this area, but it's also a product specifically made for exterior cladding. It is typically used either in a cladding orientation, as we're showing it here, or for decks and pool decks specifically as well. So it's a product made to be UV resistant, to be weather resistant, to be pest resistant, and all the resistances required for an exterior cladding orientation. So you can see in this design that we're showing here, there's not much of a change from what we showed initially. So this sticks close to that initial proposal, but the wood specification is a different specification. As a second option, we did look at more or less the same design. The main element here that we're changing is that instead of a wood, over in the back of house area here, we are suggesting a slim glazed brick condition. And I do want to highlight that for the glazed brick cladding, as well for the wood cladding, we're not going to be removing any of the brick in the areas where we do have existing brick where we're having it remain. This is more or less a rain screen condition where we will be creating a floating facade that's going to go in front of the original facade. And also the reason why we're doing a lot of these movements is because we'd like to reinforce the branding of Shake Shack. It's the reason for the painted brick, it's the reason for the corrugated metal, and the reason for the wood or for a feature tile element on the outside. So just bringing it in line with all the other Shake Shacks that have been designed in other areas, but also bringing in the wood as an option specifically here to address a local context and to be more in line with the Palo Alto design in general. So here is a view from the other facade. You can see for the wood option, we are still carrying the wood in certain portions here, not only in this larger brick areas, but also as a treatment on the mullions of the storefront as well. For the glazed brick option, I decided to go with the existing brick throughout, either keeping it remaining in the conditions where we will have an existing brick wall, or to bring in new brick where we'd be removing existing storefront from Wells Fargo and infilling those openings with the existing brick specification. Still suggesting a painted option here throughout for the wood option or for the glazed brick option. Views from the interior, and various details for both the options. So we have prepared also an additional presentation using some of the marketing materials available on the Koya website. This is just a quick overview of the product. I understand you'll have a sample as well. This product is, you can see all of the logos here, very resistant to insects, very resistant to UV, resistant to water and to decay, and in general, kind of a wonder product for an exterior application. It's also non-toxic and recyclable, and the wood original species that it's sourced from are sustainably harvested as well. So here's the process. I would recommend reading through this as well to get a better idea of what is going on with the process. But they're not necessarily injecting the wood with different chemicals. It's going through a process that changes an aspect of the wood to basically remove the bad agents within the wood that lead to warping, to waning, to insects, and as well as general decay of the wood. As a result, the wood becomes much harder, much durable, much more long-lasting. There's an outdoor stake test you can see in this graph here. No, it's small, but this top line here is the product that we're suggesting, and you can see throughout the lifetime of other woods in exterior wet conditions that they start decaying much more quickly. Especially cedar here takes a downward trend pretty dramatically, so you can see the wood that we're recommending for this application is going to be lasting for a good amount of time, and as long as we are maintaining the finish using a clear seal, which we are suggesting here, it should retain throughout the entire lifetime of the project itself. So other diagrams here, you can see other tests that swelling. You can see all the other woods here through water impregnation studies that only the Akoya stands alone as not having any kind of waxing or waning or cupping throughout its lifetime. And this is to address the specific concerns brought up by the board at the last discussion of worrying about how this facade, board and batten facade with the Sequoia, will look over a longer period of time, and that you can see that there would not be as much movement between the individual boards with this specific type of material. And then a couple of other examples, you can see with finishes on the wood over a period of time that the a typical pine or a cedar does tend to look much worse over time, but the Akoya actually stands alone as not having the same amount of decay as the other wood options. And then the last page is more information on sustainable harvesting of the initial species that they use for this wood product and for other environmental impacts, and showing it being a good, environmentally sourced and green product to be used in this application. And that about covers all of the concerns brought up by the board last time, unless you'd like me to speak more about the design in general for the Shake Shack.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from staff?
No.
Thank
sorry.
you. We'll close. Any members of the public who wish to speak?
I have one question for the architect, if that's okay.
Sure.
I remember last time you presented a design where you had a groove of some kind cut at an angle in the face of these wood strips. Is that still present in the design?
That is still present as part of the design.
Can you explain that, please?
Yes. Let me pull up the original presentation. Which one is it? Is it this one? Okay. Okay. So it's a bit difficult to read in this render. You can see that there's a line here that we showed to highlight this detail. So that line follows a path along the facade. I can pull up the elevations too. Here. So, and the line we can see present here as well. So what that line is indicating is a batten condition where we have these fins coming out from the face of the T&G application on the wall. And those battens will have a detail where they'll be a little bit more proud at one point and then cut back slightly and then be slimmer at another point. So creating more movement on the facade in general. So you can see at the top of the line here, that's where the fin would come out a little bit more proud from the face of the building. And then below that line, that fin gets cut back just slightly. So it creates kind of a notched condition coming in on a kind of a cross elevation there. So we have that movement along this facade here with this line. We have that movement along this little portion of the wood. And you can see as it wraps around to the other side of the building that we're showing those notches as well. And as an extension of this concept, where we have a wood fin condition on the front of the storefront, that line would continue. So we would notch in that fin here and here and here as we go up along the storefront. I believe we do have a detail of that as well. Let me see if we can find it. So where is the detail? Well, we can also send that detail as well for a little bit more clarification on what that notch would actually look like.
Yeah, I believe it's detail 3 on A501.
Okay.
Thank you for the explanation.
Not a problem.
Oh, and I had one question. The existing Wells Fargo Bank and the P.F. Chang building, portion of the building on what I guess is sort of the northeast side have vines all over the place.
Yes.
Have a lot of vines. And they'll remain on the P.F. Chang portion of the building. Tell me you're thinking about not having them on any portion of your building, particularly the portion of that frontage closer to El Camino?
I think for the long-term life cycle of the building, we are expecting the ivy to grow back onto the building. We're showing for clarification within our renders, no ivy currently, as kind of the condition of the building will look like on opening day. Over a course of 5 or 10 years, we expect the ivy to grow back eventually. You can see we are showing the ivy in our renders on the columns themselves.
You are on the other side, yes.
Yes, yeah, with the expectation of it growing back. So for the initial renovations that we're proposing, we will be removing the ivy back to the P.F. Chang side, but then allowing that ivy to grow back onto the building.
So I think in your drawings, it says it's going to be California pipe vine on the columns on the southern frontage, the one towards Quarry, not towards El Camino.
Okay.
And I think it's Virginia creeper on there now, not ivy.
Well, we can change that specification so it's
I
in line
like
with
it, is
that.
my point.
Okay. You like the California pipeline?
No,
or the...
I'm fine. I don't care what you do. But
Okay.
I just think that that's an attractive element of the existing building. It weaves it into its site nicely, and if it didn't interfere with your corporate presentation of self, I'd like it.
All right.
Thank you. That's helpful. And any further questions of the applicant or staff? All right. Shall we, Peter, you want to start?
Sure, thank you. So I made a note on my drawings. It says, I prefer the wood look, but will it last? And I think to me that whole question comes down to whether this wood idea of yours is going to come off or not. And I guess at some point I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and see what happens. I'll be honest with you, when I look at the detailing and look at everything I know about wood construction, this is going to be a disaster. But maybe there's something about this new wood that I don't know.
Tell us what you really think.
Well, your detail shows the end grain of the wood, the fin, up there exposed to the elements, the end of the grain of the wood exposed to the element. Is that just an absolute no-no in wood design? Maybe it's just a detail you haven't followed through on. It says you're going to glue these boards to the ledger to hold them on. It just doesn't work. You can't just glue it and expect it to stay. That's detail number 2 on A501. I am concerned that your details are full of language that says use this wood or some other wood, weather-resistant wood substance, and I think it should be this stuff if you're going to do it. I'm assuming that's what you're after. And I'm intrigued by your idea of notching the wood back now that I understand it. That's a neat idea. I think that might be effective. But the big picture is that when you just paint the brick dark like that, it just looks overbearing, and I don't think that's the right answer. And I think it's fine to try the wood. My other thought or concern had been initially I had been hoping you'd be able to get more seating or public amenity type space where the prow of the building is, where you have a field of landscaping. That was originally lavender and now it's some other native grasses. But I had been hoping that would actually be a place for benches or more public gathering, or it's really a shortcut place for people to cut across, going around the corner into the restaurant or waiting. And what it seems like you've done is just put a few benches on the side of the walkway rather than giving a little bit more space for it. I don't know if it's possible to do that or not, or if that's something you considered, but I want to hear what my colleagues think about it. But those are my two big issues on this, the wood and whether you can get more seating at the prow of the building.
Thank you. Alex?
Great. Sorry I missed the last meeting for this one. I did review the minutes for the meeting on June 21st, and I do agree with my board members about the wood. I think there was some discussion about maybe staining the brick instead of painting it, and then the plant list. So I'm on board with all of those previous comments. So on the project, I can recommend approval. I think my preference is option 1 with the Akoya wood over the glazed tile brick. I have not used it before. I think I am in the process of like refinishing all of the stained wood on my house, and it's pretty nasty stuff keeping it clean, and everything is every 2 years.
Don't look at me, Alex. Talk to the guys.
Yeah, with an army of, I'm using trisodium phosphate cleaners, which is not environmentally friendly. I'm using OxyClean and oxalic acids, and to get it to look really good, it takes work every 2 to 3 years, and that's just semi-transparent. That's not even it's even worse with the clear sealers. That being said, this is cladding on retail. I would imagine Stanford Shopping Center has fairly high standards. They're not going to let you, not maintain the facade. And it's just a skin. It's a retail skin design. They change over time. So I'm fine with with option 1. On the seating at the pointed corner, I think I understood that from the minutes, and then I did look at the site, and it seems like there's a slope there right at the corner. I'm not sure that it's actually quite so feasible. I didn't, so I think that might be an issue. I think ideally, I think if I am understanding your comment, is you want something integral into the building, and I get that, and I think I would support that, although I don't really know what it is, and it doesn't seem like there's that much space there. I think generally my take on it is that the path between your site and the Bloomingdale's isn't really landscaped very well. And I did go around the whole shopping center. It seems like they've been removing some of the landscape, maybe to save water or whatnot during the drought. But it seems like it's not quite as nice. So it would, to me, I would rather have an improvement there, and it could be on the corner of the building as well. But so I'm open to recommendations from the rest of the board. Do you think that removing lavender was a good change? We had another project, a big project, the Jewish Community Center, where they actually had to take out all the lavender that was put in all of the planter benches, because it was crazy. People could not sit there. So I think that was a good choice. And I did want to, I think the revised plant list is really good. You've got a few plants, say like the pipevines, the Aristolochia is a great plant for attracting pipevine swallow-tailed butterflies. They're not really native to the butterflies, I don't think, are in our area. They're sort of more north in San Francisco and Berkeley. But there are a whole contingent of people in San Francisco who are trying to bring them back into the city, and they've been planted a couple hundred of them to sort of reestablish the butterfly population in San Francisco. I don't think that was necessarily your intent, but for staff, if we are trying to do that, the butterfly proponents, like the Xerces Society and whatnot, say you should have the host plant as well as the nectar plant. And then the key thing is no pesticides. So there's more that we could do if the intent is really to provide habitat. It's not just picking the plant and putting it on our planting list. And then I think it's not going to work for yours. If I'm looking at your color board here with the very, very dark pink that you're proposing, but we have buildings here on Hamilton where there's existing brick and they stained it darker that I think to me, they look better than painted brick. I would imagine that it would be very hard to get something as dark as you're showing here. But I think that stain is environmentally preferable because you'd be using less stain over time. It allows the brick to breathe and has less flaking. Those are all my thoughts on this particular project.
Thank you. Robert?
Okay, yeah, I sort of had the exact same initial reaction that Peter did, that I like the wood, but my God, there's no way I could support that. I was willing to accept the brick, but just for having read what apparently this stuff does, or how well it holds up, I'd be willing to give it a shot doing it that way and go with, I guess it's option 1 or the wood option. I agree, the shopping center has fairly high standards, so if it goes to hell in a year or so, they'll let you know. They're not going to and also, it's on the ground, it's a first floor type situation. You're not worrying about scaffolding or whatever if you do, for instance, have to replace the whole thing. But like you said, I do agree the detailing of that is something, my God, you would never do with wood. So I'm willing to accept that. I think what we should do is make it so that we mandate this particular manufacturer or product, whatever you want to call it, rather than just saying or approved alternate or whatever, which is very typical in the industry, obviously, and just make it this. I think that's worth a shot. The planting and all that, I agree with my fellow members. As far as the seating, I think what I've seen when I've designed restaurants or whatever, if people want to sit outside, it's amazing. Over a year, they sort of migrate to what works for them. And after a while, if everybody wants to sit there, the planting goes away and chairs appear. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that aspect of it. I'm willing to just leave it the way it is.
Well, thank you for coming back to us. I think this is a safe place to do an experiment with vinegar-soaked wood. That's what they're saying, right? Yes. Acetic acid under pressure. I think it's a very safe place to do this. I think it's got low visibility. I think it's got Stanford Shopping Center's administration keeping track of what's happening, and you. So I'm happy with that. I like your plant palette better. I spent the last week surrounded by a lot of butterflies, and I will say, the more you can attract, the more your customers are going to want to be there. It's a magical part of life and rare these days. But coming back, I'm glad you're going to add the benches. They should be specified as backed benches, the back version of that in condition 14 staff, I believe. I think that's what you intend and what we want. And as to whether we specify Akoya or Akoya equivalent, this isn't, how does the applicant feel about that? Are you okay with specifying this specific material?
Yes, we are okay with it. In terms of installation and pricing, it definitely works for us. So.
Okay, because we don't put this in, public works contracts because we don't want to be messing with the market. But if this is improperly, but if this is acceptable to you, I
And board members, if I may, we could specify that certain type of wood, and we could say that it should come back to subcommittee if it needs to be changed.
fine. I wouldn't bet on your chances, given the opinion of the architects on the board about wood. I think you persuaded them with the Akoya, but I'm sure we can always be further educated. So I'm ready to entertain a motion. Oh, and I just wanted to say, since Alec's going to talk about how great Pipevine is, my experience with Salvia gregae is that great butterfly and hummingbird habitat,
Just one
even in small areas.
minor item on the wood. I don't like, I'm a big fan of or alternate, but the problem is that if this is fairly unique, there may not be an alternate, or somebody thinks their product is sort of like it, and we go with that. This isn't a massive proportionate part of the project, so I don't see any problem with specifying this one particular brand as compared to saying we're alternate.
Well, since it's acceptable to the applicant, I'm fine with that, too. So we're asking for a change, well, would somebody like to make a motion? Peter.
Peter, I think I also do support your comment on the exposed end grain of the wood, and I think we should.
What do you want to say about that?
I wasn't intending to get into those details, Alex. I think the more you dig, the more we're going to find. And how are the wood boards attached to your aluminum mullions between the windows? You don't show that detail, but you're going to find that challenging. Just another one. I'm ready to move that we approve the project as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
I would ask for a friendly amendment to add in condition number 14 that the new benches shall be the Metro-style backed bench by Design Works or of equivalent style and quality.
That's okay with me.
And then also the staff recommended condition, where would that go, staff, about the material? With option 1, right? We have to say option 1?
Yeah, actually, we should make part of the approval
And
that
it
we're
include-
picking option 1
Option 1
So
with
option 1 is
the,
with the specified.
with the applicant specified
Come on, Peter. Jeez.
Akoya wood. You guys are such skeptics. Based on experience, I'm sure Akoya product.
Yes, so we would need to add that in as a new condition.
Yes. Anything else, folks?
Alex, do you want to dive into those?
Do you want to add any further conditions?
No.
All right. Is that amendment accepted?
Those are acceptable amendments?
That acceptable
Accepted to me.
seconder? Okay. Moved by Board Member Balte, seconded by Board Member Guyar to recommend approval of this project as with the modified conditions as we just specified. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you very much for coming to us, and congratulations. Look forward to seeing your project.
Thank you.
Oh, We're back in session, and it is item number 4, which is our third public hearing today. Again, it's a quasi-judicial hearing for 3406 Hillview Avenue. Staff is asking for a recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a site and design review to allow the demolition of an existing 62,500 square foot research and development building and construction of a new two-story, approximately 79,000 square foot office building. This is a project under the Mayfield Agreement, which entitles Stanford to a more focused review than would otherwise be the case. And the environmental review is in the form of an addendum to the Mayfield Development Agreement, EIR. And does anybody have any conversations or site visits to report? We've all visited the site more than once. All right, staff.
Thank you, Chair Firth. Graham Owen with the planning staff. So as you mentioned, this is a site and design review application for a 79,076 square foot office building. This is also an application for architecture review, but so we're going to be looking at both the findings for architecture review and the objectives for site and design. This is the third hearing, as you mentioned. Since the June hearing, which was the most recent hearing, there's been several changes to the application. In terms of the square footage, it's actually been reduced in terms of the gross floor area. So this needs to be corrected in the slide, but it was previously an 82,030 square foot office building. From a gross floor area perspective, it's been reduced in its total gross floor area by about 3,000 square feet. What this has done is, even though the building envelope hasn't shifted, 3,000 square feet has been reallocated from just area where you could have office R&D use to specifically dedicated employee amenity space, which is exempt from gross floor area and also from parking.
Exempt from the calculations, but there's no change in building mix.
Correct, you got it. So as you mentioned also, this is a Mayfield designated project and is subject to the Mayfield Development Agreement, EIR, and mitigation monitoring and plan. First hearing was held in May, and then the second was held in June 20th. It should be corrected in the slide as well. At the June hearing, the second hearing, there were a couple of comments. First comment, and probably the most impactful, is the comment about the upper parking module, just the total area of the space that's dedicated for impervious cover, and its relatively close adjacency to the open space, which is next to the site. So there were comments about the site and design review findings and objectives and how those comport with the asphalt that's proposed adjacent to the open space. One of the most impactful comments, I think, was that that area in particular should be further studied and the impervious area reduced. The second comment was with regards to the staircase, which was proposed previously at the corner of Coyote Hill and Hillview, and just the comment that this staircase and the landings that make up the staircase should be reoriented so that they're facing directly to the employee entrance, which is off of Hillview Avenue. Third comment was that we wanted to have a little bit more information about the rooftop photovoltaic system and what was actually proposed. So this is a aerial photograph. We're all familiar with the site at this point, but just for the public. It is located in the research park at the corner of Hillview Avenue and Coyote Hill in the RP5 Research Park 5 zoning district. Adjacent to the site is SAP to the south, VMware across Hillview Avenue to the east, and then Park, Palo Alto Research Center to the north. And then you have Coyote Hill proper to the west. This is the revised site plan showing the two biggest changes to the site, which have happened since the June hearing. As I mentioned, they've reoriented the upper parking module to reduce the total amount of impervious cover and asphalt with the idea of putting 19 spaces, parking spaces actually into a landscape reserve. So this has involved a couple of changes to the geometry of the upper parking lot. In particular, it went from a two-way module so that you could have cars going in either direction to a one-way in either direction at the top of for the upper module only. So what that does is it reduces the total amount of asphalt that's closest to the open space to the west, and makes it so that all the parking stalls that are in that area are oriented, I believe, at about 60 degrees as opposed to the 90 degrees that was previously proposed. The applicants indicated that with this change, putting 19 spaces into landscape reserve, plus the 10 spaces in addition to the 19 that are reduced by virtue of putting more of the gross floor area actually into amenity space, which is exempt from parking. The total reduction is 29 spaces. This results in a net zero increase in impervious cover on the lot. The second biggest change is the reorientation of the staircase. Was previously proposed, as I mentioned, at the corner of Hillview and Coyote Hill, and now it's mid-block, or I guess, excuse me, kind of right at the center of the site frontage along Hillview, and so it more directly ties into the employee entrance, which is proposed at the front. This is showing kind of the evolution of the upper parking module, as it was originally presented with the October submittal, and then how it was presented at the June hearing, and then also how it is presented today. So showing kind of the evolution of that area and how it's changed. One of the other comments that was raised at the board hearing in June was that we needed a better rendering or better understanding of the front elevation, and so the applicants provided an additional rendering kind of showing that area along with the updated location of the staircase. Okay, so the key issues, nothing's really changed in terms of the key issues that we've raised previously. These are the things that we think are the most important with this application. Just the hillside context, you have a hill that's adjacent, and with that comes the site and design review objectives of trying to maintain ecological balance and environment, and having the project utilize sound principles of environmental design, ensuring that the project's in accord with the comp plan, and that it's going to be operated and constructed in a way that's orderly, harmonious, and compatible with its surroundings. In addition to this, we also have the architecture review findings, which you're all familiar with and which apply to the project as well. So with that, we do recommend approval of the project. This is the third hearing, so we are asking for a recommendation on the project. One thing I wanted to point out is I provided at Plates' memo, which clarifies the intent of staff's new condition of approval, which is condition number 6 with regards to landscape reserve. So this modifies the language, but doesn't modify the intent. It just clarifies that if we do see a request from the applicant to utilize those 19 spaces which are proposed in landscape reserve, that they would need to accompany that request with a parking demand study indicating that it's required for their use. So with that, I'll leave it at that and let the applicant take over with their presentation. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff before we hear from the applicant? Okay. Just so the record's clear, we also have at Places a document from Stanford Real Estate Office headed transmittal dated July 12, 2018 from Jim Inglis and Lisa Liu to Graham Owen concerning the 3406 Hillview site and design. It contains a response letter dated July 12th and the revised drawing set. Applicant?
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Jason McCarthy. I'm a principal with Studios Architecture, and I'm pleased to be here to represent the project on behalf of the design team and the applicant. As Graham noted, we're all very familiar with the site, but having said that, because context is so crucial to this project, it always helps to reframe. So the proposed project is at the corner of Hillview Avenue and Coyote Hill Road, and As we've mentioned, the significant influence on the design really is Coyote Hill Road and its wonderful presence, rolling grasses, the oak-studded hillside is really just a truly unique site, and we think a very important site in the research park. Also important in its context is that we are deep in the heart of the research park, and we're putting forward what we think is a very forward-looking design, a new vision of what research and innovation should be, a design that's inviting use and enjoyment of the outdoor spaces and the site itself. And so we think that this project is a truly unique opportunity. Just to quickly recap some of the many comments we've had and I think design enhancements that we've developed through our dialogue with you. We really truly appreciate all of the comments to date, and we feel that we've taken them to heart and sincerely feel that the project is much richer for this dialogue. Just briefly to note the south elevation, which we revised for the last hearing, there were a number of enhancements to increase the amount of wood and really just in general tie that south elevation more into the overall context or concept of the project, so it's more consistent in detail, material, and scale. We were also asked to look further at the mechanical screen areas. We were able to lower the roof screen height several feet, and we demonstrated through a number of site sections that it's really minimally visible from various angles, and we think it's really a part of the overall composition of volumes in the project. And then thirdly, we were asked to revisit the bird-friendly aspects of the design. We did go back and look at a number of guidelines and made further enhancements to the amount of bird-friendly measures that we were taking, and we think overall are presenting a very bird-friendly project. Regarding the site, you asked us to consider the screening of the parking along Coyote Hill Road and the frontage there, and we think we've done a number of measures to enhance that planting and really feel strongly that we've got a good buffer between the roadway and the parking. And then further, you asked us to contemplate the stormwater features and whether or not they could really become a featured element, and we've embraced that comment and have added the juncus plants and larger stone features to really highlight those as a part of the design and an integral enhancement or feature to the overall landscape design. So we'll focus the bulk of our presentation today on the items that Graham noted, significantly the approach at the eastern entrance and the stairway to the Hillview Avenue approach, and the parking. So for that, we'll have James Winstead with the Gazzardo Partnership lead our presentation.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, good morning, guys. We're happy to be before you guys again, talking through some of the questions with this project. So yeah, the first change I want to talk to you guys about is the east stairway entry off of Hillview. Quickly here, you can see from left to right sort of the chronology of how we've approached this and feedback we've gotten from you guys in this room. You last saw the middle picture, it was the second slide. We really started to think about the user experience as you walk up these stairs, and it started to include landings with some seating and interactive opportunities. And then from conversations with you guys last time, we've gotten now to the current plan, which you see on the right, where the stairway has shifted south down roughly mid-block, where it then also aligns off of the central spine of the building and really brings you right up to that second employee entrance there. Quickly here, this is a comparison. The last time you guys saw this picture, this was the primary slide showing that stairway from the corner. So with it shifted now to the south, we've been able to give most of this view over to the native palette that we're using on this project. And again, that's bringing down really inspired by some of the open space, the adjacency, just the context within the whole research park, relating to the landscape, sort of be the front part of this view. And then we think this actually represents, a visitor or even just a passerby's kind of first experience of the site. Try to get a feel for how it would actually, just the building's presence and how that could feel. Tree placement has been carefully selected in this whole area as well, to really kind of frame that eastern facade of the building and let that read as a presence on the street instead of sort of maybe like lost in the trees in some of the previous ways we had it. So with this stairway shifted now to the center point, it's really given us a great opportunity to tie the whole stairway gesture into that upper plaza that we have at the building. That offers opportunity to, extend building activities even down into the stairway, just as part of how the building lives, in addition to, providing that nice, clear hierarchy of wayfinding to that front door or the secondary door, and honestly. It also ties in with the accessible path that cuts sort of diagonally through the space. And then this new location actually gives the opportunity to tie the start of each of them together. So the stairs and the ramp start at that exact same point at the lower plaza there. And then each of these plazas is provided with built-in seating like you see here. So you have some at that middle landing, and then down at that street side plaza where you've got some seating right there at street level. And then new oak trees planted in this area would provide comfort and shade throughout this whole zone. Planting design through the whole area, again, would be a continuation of the native palette we're proposing here. And then south of the stairway, starting to work in some larger shrub material and a little bit denser tree planting to give a little bit of a buffer between the entry experience here and then the auto court nearby or the ramp down into the garage. But again, we think that this whole expression tying together nicely is a really great improvement to the whole eastern facade of the project. And then, yeah, here's a view again, as you can kind of see it as you potentially coming up the stairs. I'll pass it back to Jason here real quick.
So I think, we hope that this additional view helps really demonstrate that both the realignment of the stair and the architecture together are working in great symphony, we think, to really clarify wayfinding and the identity of the project. I think the realignment of the stair brings focus to that eastern plaza, and you can see that the architecture in its scale and massing and articulation also helps draw your eye to that entry plaza. There are a number of articulated elements there, the horizontal sunshades and entry canopy, and then of course the wood volume as a framing element with the roof deck on top of it. So we really see this as a very active corner, and again, a building that's inviting in participation and an enjoyment of the site on many levels. I'll also use this slide to briefly comment on the discussion about photovoltaics. You had asked us to just be careful with what we're going to see from the street around photovoltaics. And what we've proposed for the project is a very low slung system. It's a ballasted photovoltaic system that sits directly on the roof, so it's not mounted on a raised platform or frame. It's directly on the rooftop, and it's a very low height, so we don't believe this will be visible from nearly any angle on the project.
Great. Yeah, so back to the second main change that we're here to show you guys today is adjustments to this upper parking loop. As Graham mentioned, this comes with 2 changes to the parking quantities. The conversion of building area to amenity space reduces the total parking count by 10. And then from there, we're proposing to put 19 of the remaining stalls into landscape reserve. And then those 19 occur, I don't know if you can see the cursor, but they're along this western edge here. There's 16 here, and then there's 3 right up in this zone here. So this reduction in parking really freed up what we're able to do with the configuration of that upper parking loop. So the shift to the one-way traffic, it's much more efficient as far as how much asphalt you need to serve these remaining cars. And then it gave us the ability to pull the whole thing away from the property line from 30 to 50 feet. It's about 30 here, and then it pretty quickly gets to 50-ish through most of the rest of this area here. So the second piece of this is, continuation of the stairs that we talked about in the front, bringing them through the building here and using that same pattern for the stairway that brings you up to this upper parking here. Similarly furnished with some seating at the landings and then a second little landing here with some seating right at the auto court, offering you a chance to, sit in the shade if you're waiting for a ride share or perhaps a shuttle. But back to this upper, so the one-way pattern, it also let us bring this formal pattern from the building up and then let it sort of terminate into this much more informal, sort of irregularly laid out parking lot. We actually thought that with the one-way traffic and the sort of irregularly shaped landscape islands and the dense tree planting, that actually started to feel more like something you might find at like a state park or a trailhead parking lot as opposed to a formal kind of office lot parking. And then, so, with the conversations we have with you guys here, and then some of the changes we've made to this site, as Graham mentioned, we've been able to, what we think is provide a building that gets more use out of this site, which then comes with more parking, and have been able to include all of that into this project with no net increase in impermeable area. And then that is with the inclusion of further, outdoor amenity spaces that really let users get out, interact with each other, and then really just get a chance to interact with your surrounding landscape. Yeah, and I think that's it. And then we're all happy to obviously clarify any points or answer any questions if you guys have
Any
them.
questions of the speaker? Go.
I have a question for Stanford. For the parcel in back of this particular property on Coyote Hill, it has the agricultural conservation zoning. I was wondering if there's a leaseholder for that, or is it vacant? They have horse ranch.
You're asking about Tiffany
No, we haven't done that
Griego
yet.
from Stanford Research
that
Park. You're asking about Coyote Hill specifically? Or which parcel?
Yeah, so I think, so it's the
Yeah.
hill, as I understand it, right, in back. So this is, where is it? Hillview, right? And this is Deer Creek.
So,
So I guess it's the hill.
yeah, I can tell you what I know. I don't know all the facts about the site, so we need to check. It's in the county, and I think it's subject to the Williamson Act. But what else? I'm sorry, I missed the balance of the question. I am not
Was
the
there
right
a
person.
tenant? Was there a leaseholder? Is there a
Oh,
tenant?
no, I don't think so. No.
No.
I don't think so. I don't think there's a leaseholder.
Thank
I've
you.
never heard that.
Okay.
I'm not the right person to answer that, though. I can ask around. Let me ask our attorney.
I think that, I do understand that a lot of that area is part of the county, but it's on our zoning map. So I'm thinking that there is one parcel that's in Palo Alto.
It's county. It's definitely county.
Okay.
Okay, staff will check on that.
I think it's not a critical path item for me. I'm just curious.
All right. Is there any member of the public who cares to speak on this? Do you have a?
Well, our civil engineer thinks that parcel you're pointing to is in the city, so we need to confirm this. I'm sorry, we need time to do that.
Thank you.
We're speculating.
Is there any member of the public who would care to comment on this item before we close the public hearing? Volunteers? All right. Okay, yes, we can do disclosures again. Any conversations or site visits we want to comment on? I think we've all seen the site. I went back to look at it again. I'm sure some of the rest of you did as well.
I did look at the site yesterday, and I did see that there's a large mock-up in the parking lot. And I also, I missed the last meeting on June 21st, and I did review the minutes for that.
Thank you. So I'll bring it back to the board. I think, Alex, you get to start.
Okay, so I can recommend approval of the project today. I did read the comments from the board about the upper parking area and the idea for landscape reserve, and I think I do understand that our purview for that is limited. I just had a couple points. One is that the parking, most architects and developers are saying that the parking ratio, the office density is going up generally, not for all uses, but generally it's going up. And that the tenants are asking for more parking. And our parking ratio hasn't changed in a long time. So I think we just have to be really mindful of that. And I don't think it's the ARB's purview to sort of start tinkering with that. I think that we have the director and the planning commission for that. With respect to the parking reserve, in the past, we've shown it in the plans, like what the full build out would be. And that would be part of your entitlement. And it's not like you would have to come back to us to get some sort of new approval for the parking lot. And as I understand the drawings, that's not in here. I haven't seen it. And I think it should be in here. And I think, if I understand the minutes correctly, I think some of the board members were saying that they could not make the finding if the parking went to the edge of the property, closer to the edge of the property. And it seems to me that in this particular, that you'd still be in the full build out with all the spaces. You would be pretty close to the existing parking boundary. So I'm a little bit troubled with that. I think that I can make the finding that there's a buffer in there. That's, it seems like we have, like our zoning map tells us a lot of information about what we should be doing. So we have 50 to 100 foot landscape buffers in parts around Barron Park. We have, or actually, that's incorrect. We have, 50, I think, 50 to 100 foot setbacks, landscape setbacks in Barron Park. We have it's a 210 foot landscape setback on a Restradero and 50 foot elsewhere, on all the main streets in the parking lot, on like Page Mill Road. And we don't really have the zoning map does not really specify anything here. And in my mind, it's all Stanford land, like most of the times they're lease lines, sometimes they're parcel lines, but at the end of the day, if there's a parking lot here near the boundary line, like what difference does it make? It's not visible to the public. It seems like there's no leaseholder. So to me, I don't really quite get the point of having a buffer. It's all Stanford land. It's all part of the same entity. So that's where I'm in the parking. I do think it should be shown in the set. I do support all the landscape revisions and the building revisions. I think those all look good. And I think there was some issue about the roof screen. I can support the roof screen and the solar panels. And I don't think I completely understood all of the proposals that you're showing for the changes that you've made for the bird-friendly glazing. I think I understand some of it, but I'm not sure I got the full extent of the changes. I was mostly concerned about the large amount of glass on the Deer Creek facade. Oh, and then one last item. So near your driveway entrance on Hillview, so I think you've got like a backflow preventer, stormwater treatment, and gas meter, and all that. I think I'd kind of like to see, or maybe if it's an enlarged drawing that could be reviewed by staff. But I've seen some other projects where it really hasn't been resolved very well, and I don't want to name particular projects, but where all of that stuff really wasn't very well coordinated, the landscape and utility stuff. I mean, when I've gone out there, it seems like if somebody had planted a hedge or something, that you could sort of mitigate the bright red backflow preventers. And you do have enough space. I think that it all can fit, but it seems like I would like to just make sure that gets coordinated. Okay, and that's all that I have.
Alex, excuse me, which corner was that?
So this is the Hillview. There's the driveway entrance,
right.
And right against the neighboring property line, or the neighboring property, which is
space.
SAP, right?
Oh, sorry, Hillview.
So I think it's all right here in this corner.
Got it.
Like all of the big ugly stuff is right there in the corner. And I mentioned it because the SAP, I think, is just all lawn, so there's nothing screening it from their side.
Chair Firth, if I may, just to answer the earlier question about the adjacent Coyote Hill. So the answer is a portion of the open space area that's immediately to the west is in the city. And then once you go up and over and then onto the loose side of Coyote Hill, a portion of it's in the county. So it's kind of right on the city border.
Yeah,
but our zoning is for our own city, and it's ACD.
And it applies to that parcel.
Yep.
Yeah, and as I recall, there was considerable dispute about how far the research park development should go, what sort of development potential it had, and the current zoning and the Williamson Act contract are a holding pattern. I think I got here just to hear the dispute in 98, but not follow it. Robert.
Thank you. I can approve the project at this point. I'm still not a big fan of the north elevation, but I think in the overall scheme of things, it's acceptable. The landscaping's come a long way. I think the modification of the front entry or rear entry, whatever you want to call it, I think is an improvement. I could accept the current plan with the landscape reserve, and then agree with the modification to the condition of approval number 6. I agree with you on some of the things, like with the backflow preventer, but invariably it seems like in the past I've run into things where you do it a certain way, then the fire department comes in and goes, no, we want the ready access, and all of a sudden they strip everything around it. And so it's a never-ending battle where you've got 2 or 3 city agencies arguing with each other. And so just do the best you can on that one, I think, is basically all we can say. So like I said, I can approve it at this point the way it is.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Alex, can I try to dig into your mind? Do you have any experience with this landscape parking reserve on other projects over the years? How has it worked?
Yeah, I know. I was trying to think of last night I was trying to pull out examples, but I didn't have enough time. But I think the intent is that it's approved both ways, right? So off the bat, it's landscape. But then if they ever need it, they can convert it without having to submit another ARB application. And the key thing is it's really useful for people who don't think they need to build all of their parking, right? So then we get landscape, my recollection is that we did something in the medical center on Welch Road. Yeah, I'll go through there. There's some 2 new buildings off of Welch Road, and I think they were able to remove the parking from the front yard. And so it's all just a large, expensive landscape instead of having the parking in the front of the building.
So from a staff perspective, I would agree with most of your comments. We have certainly done landscape reserve in the past for uses that don't think they need all of the required parking. They are usually kind of dashed in on the site plan so that the board is aware of where they could go in the future. And also with this particular project, though, we have actually enhanced it slightly with the new condition by requiring a traffic study prior to this landscape reserve being constructed as parking.
I also had 2 situations. I just want to answer the same thing with that. I've had 2 situations where it's been used, and in both cases, it was actually a request, same thing, from the applicant, and it turned out that at this point, one is like 8 years and the other one's more than 10. Everybody likes the way it is and have never questioned how to, or that they want to bring it back. The way, when those were approved, it was sort of we'll let you build it this way. The build out is, the opposite way. If you ever decide you want to do the build out, you'll need to come to us, tell us you're going from one from the other. But that was the extent of it. Didn't have to go through a new approval.
That was the gist of my question, Alex. Do you know if these people have they come back and done the parking in lieu of the landscaping on these projects? How often does it stick the way we approve it up front?
Oh yeah, it's not very common, right? The landscape reserve isn't really common, so I would have to go back and look really carefully.
Okay, so my take on this is that I really want that I think the parking lot needs to be farther from the open space and the property line, and this is a mechanism that we're finding that seems to be a good compromise to make it work. That's why I can support the project. It will be disappointing to me if that ends up becoming parking. I understand that that's the process we're working with right now, but it should be clear going into the future that surface parking in these hills close to open space preserves is something that I at least think is problematic. Other than that, I think the project is looking good, and I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I see that first slide, which shows the context? This shows this site in Xerox, I think it's Xerox Park across the street, across Coyote?
Correct. 1 second.
I guess it's sheet 1, 2 is one. I mean, there's a bunch of them that show it, but. So this is a 5-acre site, or 6.5-acre site, right? About that. And the park site is even bigger. And it's a little misleading because it flows into the next one. But the thing that's striking about this whole thing is how much asphalt there is. If you look at sheet 1.2, it's even more dramatic. The pattern of development up here is buildings surrounded by great big asphalt parking lots, acres and acres and acres of asphalt. And it's interesting because I remember all the excitement about VMware and all the wonderful special features of that building, and then look at the parking lots. And this is so different from most of the sites we see, because usually we're really focused on the building. It's using up a very high percentage of the surface area, and that's not true here. It flips it. And I think that's why we spend so much time thinking about surface parking, about landscaping, about large-scale circulation patterns, because there are a lot of choices. And because this may have been seen as terrific environmental design when it was built across the street, but it wouldn't be now. We would not be building those great big asphalt parking lots. And that's a change for us. It's a change for the property owners. It's a change for the tenants. And our response is driven in part by a change in our comprehensive plan, and we're just in the first stages of that. And my thanks to Stanford for its very thoughtful letter to us on this issue, and my thanks for the really helpful drawings and illustrations, my thanks for the revised design, which I think is a significant improvement, and my thanks to staff for the recommended condition. In time, the city will be changing its parking standards to become consistent with its comprehensive plan. We're required to do that. Our land use laws need to be consistent, maybe just our land use designations, but I think more than that. But we're sort of in an interim stage here, and this issue is coming up on all the projects we're looking at, and this is a recurring theme, as those of you who have to follow us know. I like the building. I like the altered access from Hillview. I think it works better. I think by now the southern elevation looks quite attractive. I don't know if you're just doing prettier drawings or if it's just a much better building, but it looks good to me. And seriously, it does look good. I think by moving the walkway, you not only center that entrance and say this is how you get to the building, but you provide a better landscape opportunity over in the corner. I don't think I have anything to complain about. Not that we seek to complain. I think Alex's point about struggling with the utilities to get them to make commitments early on is an important one. I know from experience, as I think we all do, how difficult that is, but to the extent it's useful in interdepartmental discussions, the ARB strongly supports getting this up early so that Stanford's good design doesn't get damaged in a very visible section. I don't think that utilities always have to be hidden, but I do think they need to be thought through. And I will follow Alex's good example and not name names or sites. I think that the redesign of the parking lot looks like a significant improvement. I like the changed the changed use of streets. I like your more, I guess you called it relaxed curved islands. So I support the project with the condition as recommended by staff. That's approval number 6. Would somebody care to make a motion, or is there further discussion?
I have one more question for Stanford. There's an existing barbed wire fence along the back of the property line. What are the thoughts about that? Does that need to be retained?
Because they're running cattle on it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We will replace that.
With what?
Yeah.
Is it possible to not replace it and just remove it?
Ooh.
Or no?
I don't think so.
We typically like to designate the property line, but... Oh, yeah, if you could, Jim, if you could please use the microphone for our...
Jim Inglis, Stanford Real Estate. INGLIS. We typically use something to the effect of a black chain link fence because it tends to really drop away and not be noticed. We don't put them any higher than we think we need to, so maybe 5 foot or something like that, just to sort of maintain the property line. It helps the landscapers and so forth, and make sure people don't start blending one way or the other. And tenants nowadays are getting a little bit more careful about security and so forth too. So that would be a typical approach for us.
Oh, I did, well, while Alex was saying that, I did very much appreciate Stanford's letter, which is a slight modification of the one in our packet. But I did want to say that it talks about underparking, and it talks about standards and changing standards. And it's important, I think, not to confuse zoning standards and land use standards with on-the-ground reality in both directions. I mean, when Graham's talking about reducing the FAR, the gross floor area of the building, but it's not reducing the gross floor area of the building, it's reducing the capital G, capital F, capital A, defined term in the code, floor area, which in turn reduces the parking, which is a great requirement. So I think it's our challenge for the next months and years is to figure out what's an acceptable environmental load in terms of transportation, and we've got a guideline from the comprehensive plan, and then given that, what are the implications in terms of on-site parking provision, and to what extent does our energy go elsewhere? So I don't think that we know what underparking is yet, and all of this in the general plan, the comprehensive plan, assumes that our ways of life will change in many ways, in particular in this regard. Having said that, does somebody want to make a motion? I will make a motion. I move approval, that we recommend approval of the project as submitted with condition number 6, modified as set forth in the memorandum from Graham Owen, planner, dated July 19th, 2017, and with a further condition that the boundary fence on the west side of the parcel be replaced. Do you want to see any more specific than that, Alec? You want to, their choice?
Well, when you finish, is that all?
Is there anything else I left out?
Well, I think that the board should get a copy of the full build-out of the parking layout.
I disagree, because I want the staff's condition where they'll come back.
So just to clarify, the way that we've written it, it would not come back to the board?
I understand.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. What are we saying here? So Alex, you're saying the staff's condition is about demonstrating the need for the parking. Your condition is about understanding what the parking would look like, fully designed out. Is that right?
Normally, landscape reserve would just be dashed in, so it would be green.
This
but
is
you
about
would-
as specific as we get.
Yeah, it's just dashed in so that you know the area that it would likely go.
And it is here.
It is dashed in lightly.
Yeah.
It's very hard to read on the screen here, but
you gave us a big
there's an
copy.
outline there. Yeah.
It's on this sheet.
I have not seen it.
This one?
I'm not saying it's not there, but I was so light that I
Maybe you
haven't
could take
seen
us
anything.
through it and point out which line is which.
Let me see if I can find it in the overall plan here.
It says it's this line right there. We should probably have consensus on which line we're talking about. It's
Okay,
this
I think I
thing.
understand.
You can see here.
Yeah,
it's
it takes out a few trees.
It is difficult to
doesn't?
discern, but you see the dashes are, the shorter dash is a contour line.
So it is lightly shown on sheet L 1.0.
And does it or does it not take out trees?
No, the trees are planned where the future parking islands would be.
So they would still remain?
Yep.
Any further questions on this?
Yeah, I have a question. So then, if it's going to be fully expanded, is it going to go to the October 17 or the June 18 version?
Even in the expanded version, we've moved that western boundary further from the property line by virtue of narrowing up the traffic loop and going to a diagonal entrance into
Graham,
the
would you color in the reserve line on the third view on this sheet and show it to us? Mark it up and pass it around.
Now you're going to do that for all of us then?
No, you can pass it. Yes. Everybody gets a hand-colored copy. It's for Robert.
I got it, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm fine. Yeah, I'll give it back to Win.
Thank you.
Okay, well, and just to follow up on this, okay, I'm okay with that. And then I would say also on sheet 1.9, which is our site summary, that we should put in the 19 landscape reserve spaces under parking. It's there, there's one, it says like build later, right? Yeah.
What are you looking at?
I would just add it to the, well, I guess it's fine.
I think we're okay.
My recollection is that we've shown it. We've added it in. So basically what I'm saying is that if somebody's looking at this, that you add it up,
I'm looking at the
and
wrong
under
side.
the total, you get 264.
Here we go. Sorry.
It's just a small
Heart failure up
point,
here.
but I think that's how we've done it in the past. Okay.
So it's more semantics than anything.
I think we're okay.
We can have that be revised in the final set.
But you're right, Jeff.
It isn't, yeah, it's noted here, landscape reserve.
No, I know.
All right. So we have clearly documented the border of the landscape reserve. We know that the trees are going to be retained if that gets built. We know what the process is, which does not involve us if Stanford decides to proceed with that. Can I get a second to my
I will
motion?
second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your proposal and your hard work, to you and to staff. Look forward to seeing the building and the gardens. On the topic, when we're going to get to we have no minutes, board comments, questions, or announcements. This was a small project. Stanford is proposing 2.5 million, is that right, square feet of additional academic space. And the comment period on the revised, recirculated environmental impact report closes on July 27th. So if anybody has comments on that, that is the deadline for doing it. No minutes, no study sessions, no subcommittee items, nothing needs to be. Do we need to appoint a subcommittee for the parking structure? Where do we end up? We do, don't we?
I think we don't know the date as of yet, so I think we said we would do that, as we start to know those dates.
I would be happy for two of you to volunteer to be on that subcommittee. Yeah. You want to do it, Alex? Would you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Alex and Robert, unless there's a,
Okay,
we
so-
do it if there's a date scheduling problem.
Yeah, so
but-
we'll note that and just make sure they're available.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Alex?
So on Sunday, July 27th, 2 o'clock, there's an event at the Rinconada Library. So I think they have an 60th anniversary, and there's going to be a exhibition and presentation on Edward Durrell Stone, the architect of the library and City Hall and the hospital.
Cool.
And also the architect, Group 4, who renovated all of our libraries, is going to give a presentation as well.
When's that?
Great.
Sunday, July 27th from 2 to 4.
Thank you.
And I think that the exhibition will be there for, I don't know how long, but more than just the presentation. Right?
Shoot, I'll be in Portland.
And the North Ventura cap is, I think, scheduled for September. I think they were looking at September 19th for the first meeting.
So we will be shorthanded for 2 meetings, but I think we'll have enough people, and we will all be here for the public safety building, which is coming back, right? Somebody stopped me in the cafeteria.
The safety building is August 2nd.
Right.
And so, yes, we would have
a full
everyone.
house, full complement, which I'm sure we'll need. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.